Welcome, guys, to the Relentless Growth Podcast. Here with myself, Chase Calhoun, and my good friend Jack Maher. Jack, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Ready to dive in.
Today, we're gonna talk about something that doesn't sound super exciting, but I'd say it's very important: metrics. You can't improve what you don't measure. I think it's very, very, very important. But before we get into it, let's do some wins and updates. What's a win for you this week, and any updates on what you guys got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of just general updates. Tennessee is in the rainiest season in recorded history. On our outside projects, I don't have a lot of positives this week, unfortunately. But our landscape crews are prepared and ready to install landscaping on our first building on a new complex as soon as weather allows, and so they're geared up and ready to go, and they've done a ton of work to get to this point. So it's a win, but also it's a challenge. We're facing weather delays left and right here in Tennessee. So challenge and a win for you there. What about you, Chase?
There you go. I think for me, man, we just filled a project manager position, so that's exciting for us. We've been kind of delaying that as long as possible. And then, quite honestly, we put out an advertisement and didn't get nearly as much interest as we had hoped. And then we ended up getting somebody that applied and interviewed quickly. That's I think going to be an amazing fit. And so I guess it doesn't take a ton of interest. It only takes one or two really good interested candidates. I guess is more important. And so we're excited to have him get started. We can definitely use the help on the construction side. So I think that's a win and an update for us. Just bringing on that help. We're getting ready to start a bunch of small projects, and so having some help just to be boots on the ground and eyes out there is going to be helpful for us.
No, that's awesome. That's great news.
Cool, man. Well, let's get into it. I guess for me, when I think of like metrics and measuring what matters, I think we've talked about goal setting in the past. And so I think it kind of goes hand in hand. Like it's great to have goals. But if you're not measuring stuff or the goals aren't measurable, I don't think they really work well. We can probably roll through some different parts, business, personal, stuff like that, as far as measuring. One place where like I've been a lot more intentional and I hadn't in the past is in business. And so, it's easy to have big goals about wanting to do extra and, we want to hit this revenue mark or we want this amount of units or this much rent. Like those are kind of easy to set, but like how you distill that down. One thing I've been working on a lot lately for business, how do you distill that down into like measurable, like weekly measurable things? Like what do we need to be measuring this week that's going to move us towards those longer term goals? And honestly, like with our construction company, it was just really simple stuff like how much cash do we need to have in the bank every week to not run out of money? Like it seems very simple, but it's like if you're not tracking that, like that can go low and then you can find yourself in a tough spot. Or how much do we need to bill each week to move the needle forward? And then other stuff, we're doing a lot of things with social media, like in our business. And so it's like, how many pieces of content do we want to post each week to move that forward? What kind of business metrics are you guys tracking across your business?
Yeah, sure. So we run EOS like I know you guys do, and so we've got they call it a scorecard, which is just it's the metrics that you want to track every week. And so like the key ones that we track and look at each week in our leadership meeting is we track units delivered, which units completed and turned over to property management. And so we track that every week. We track occupancy rates at all of our properties. And then if we've got like a new property, we track backlog of leases because usually we'll pre-lease units. And so we track like how many people we've got in the queue that haven't moved in yet. And then sometimes we change those metrics from time to time, but those are the ones we're tracking right now. But like when we're building houses, we track sales in the pipeline. We track closings coming up, and we've got baseline metrics. Real EOS is real simple. If we're above our baseline, then it's green. If we're below it, it's red. and then we talk about it as a group. And so it's a super simple red light, green light scenario, but at least it forces you to look at it once a week and to know and to analyze patterns. And so that's kind of how some of the key ones that we look at in our business.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, very, very, very similar, right? And I think with the business, the EOS is what really kicked it off for me on the business. I think maybe personally I was doing a little bit more of this earlier on, but EOS has really helped me to focus on getting them, I guess, squared away and tracked for the business. Is there times or like when do you decide that maybe you need to change the metrics or add something? I know for me specifically, it's like I try to get in front of it now. If I feel like something maybe isn't going well, instead of getting upset, like, hey, this thing isn't going well, I've been trying to look at like, are we actually tracking something that's going to move that forward? I guess, is there situations for you where you've either added or changed a metric that you're tracking? And then what prompted you to do that?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think with metrics, it's tough sometimes to I guess there's like reporting the metric and then there's like doing something about it, and sometimes it's easy to get in the pattern of like just reporting it. And then it's like, hey, we've been red for 4 weeks in a row. Like what action are we going to take? And so I think just looking at it is a huge step. I think it's a step that most people don't take. And so I think, but the next step is when it drops down to red or when you have a pattern of looking at it. And we change metrics, probably not super frequently, but maybe, quarterly or once through the year, we may shift metrics or things like that. And so we've definitely added some and removed some depending on the situation and depending on what's going on in the market. You may set a goal that was reasonable. We had a backlog goal during COVID that would be entirely unreasonable at any other given point in home building history, and so it worked for a little while, but then if we just kept that for all time, we would just constantly be discouraged because that number didn't fit. And so I think it requires reanalyzation with the market, with whatever's going on in your specific area, just to make sure that it's an achievable goal. You don't want it to be so achievable that it's easy, but achievable enough that, people get inspired to keep hitting it.
Yeah. You guys have been doing this in business a lot longer than we have as far as tracking the actual metrics. And I know you guys made a big pivot a couple years ago in that you were building a bunch of homes and then you completely stopped because they weren't selling. Do you think that having these metrics, like, is that something that you guys were tracking these metrics weekly and it was like red, 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 red? Hey, something's going on here. Should we make a big change? Because it wasn't like it was a pretty drastic change to stop completely. Do you think these metrics help you catch that kind of slowdown early on?
I do think they did, and I think hindsight being 2020, we probably should have seen the pattern earlier. But I think they definitely did. We normally wouldn't have that so front of mind, but because for coming out of COVID, it was like we had a backlog of, I don't know, 50 sold houses, that we hadn't delivered, which, we've never had in the history of the company, and we probably may never have again. But, it dwindled down to 25, and that was no big deal. That was still a great number. But we definitely could have seen that pattern a little earlier. So I think we'll recognize that a little better the next go around. But, sometimes it's tough because, we all deal with this. Building's cyclical, and so, there's sales seasons, there's little things that affect it. And so sometimes it's tough to know, hey, is this a little period that, spring is going to hit and we're going to bounce out of it? Or is this an overall pattern? And so I think next time we'll probably analyze that a little quicker, but it definitely helped us having those numbers that we were looking at every week to be able to make some decisions.
Yeah, cool. That's very cool. Anything else, I guess, with business metrics or setting them? The one thing that comes to mind for me is that we've done is like maybe like if we have different kind of departments or parts of the business, we may have more metrics. We may have like 5 to 7 just for the property management side of things. But then when we meet with the leadership team, we'll distill that down, we'll just take the top 2 or 3 that we think are the most important to discuss at the leadership level. I think that's one thing that's worth mentioning to people. Like it's okay if you have a specific thing, if you have more, but overall, like you only want to be looking at maybe 5 to 7 total. Anything else, like business wise, when it comes to setting specific measurable metrics?
The only thing I would say with the metrics is I think it's a great idea. And as leaders, I think it's our job to push them. Like when we started building multifamily, we were finishing 1 a week, 1 unit every week, which wasn't bad. But now generally we finish 1 a day. So we finish 5 in a week. And so I can remember the conversations of like, hey, what if we did 2? And at the time it was like, that's a little out there, I don't, it was a push, but just you get to a new baseline and then you look back and it seems easy. And so just getting in a rhythm of when possible and when it makes sense to push those forward. Generally people like a challenge, they like moving up, getting better. And so just with those metrics, don't keep them stagnant. You talked about reevaluating them, but push them forward, give people something to work towards, because they'll generally rise to the occasion and hit it.
Yeah, I really like that. Cool. Let's shift a little bit away from business. What about personal life? Like, are you tracking metrics? I know, like EOS, like we use a software, so it's like literally we have a scorecard that's red or green. Like
Yep.
we're pretty formal about it, like in the business. But what about your personal life? Are you tracking specific metrics, whether it's fitness or marriage or whatever? Do you have stuff that you're tracking in any of those areas of your life?
This is something I could probably learn a lot from you. I don't do it a ton, so I'm super religious about tracking fitness metrics. There's a saying, I'm sure you've heard it in the semi-endurance world of, hey, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. And so like if I do a workout, it's tracked, heart rate is tracked, and it's posted for everybody to see. And so that keeps me accountable from a standpoint of, I can't just say I did something. It's recorded, it's got a record of it, it's out there. And so from a fitness standpoint, that keeps me accountable. In terms of tracking like time with family, I'd say I've got like a couple key things that I try and do. I've got times that I try and get home every day or things like that, but I don't do a ton of tracking on the family side. And I think it's something maybe I should do. But I'd love to hear kind of how you handle that and what you do, because that's something I could improve on for sure.
It's so similar in that I think I could be doing a better job at it, but it's something that I could see the value in. It makes me think of Rob Dyrdek. I don't know if you've listened to any of his stuff, because it's funny, because I remembered him from having like a silly reality TV show and being like a skater guy. But if you listen to some of his like recent podcast stuff that he puts out, like he's the person that comes to mind to me that I think he tracks metrics like in his businesses, but also his personal life, like as well or more so than his business. And I think he tracks like everything. And it's like he's literally on a daily basis. And like that's really helped him optimize his life. So I'd say he'd be like this extreme version of somebody who's doing that really well. Same thing, like I'm setting goals and I've got big stuff I'm doing with like fitness and things like that. I'm not on Strava, and I have people give me crap about that sometimes because I'm not putting my workouts on there, but I probably should, right?
Yeah, that didn't happen then.
Yeah, exactly. I am good when it's like I've got the one place I'd say where I've been forced to do it well fitness wise is with like my diet. And so like I've got a goal of like a calorie amount that I'm trying to hit, and macros, especially with like protein, that I'm trying to hit, be at or below a certain amount of calories and at or above a certain amount of protein. And that's something I've done a really good job about tracking, like daily. Everything I eat basically should go into like my fitness pal. So I'm definitely tracking those metrics. One place where I've started doing it, and I feel like it's been helpful, and it sounds a little weird and we had to work through it a little bit, but it's my marriage. We started doing a basically ripped off version of a level 10 meeting on a weekly basis when we can within our marriage. And we have some we have some scorecard items on there. One thing I will say is that it was important for us that we went through and we changed the names of everything. So it's not called a scorecard. I think we're calling it tracking what matters, And so it's not so businessy sounding, right? But at the same point, I mean, there's stuff that's like, in my marriage where it was like, when we dug into it, it was something that was really important for Brenda to do, for me to do like on a daily basis. And it's like, one, not something I would ever thought of, but when she said, hey, if you just help me clean up for a few minutes around the house while I'm getting Aspen ready for bed, like that would be a huge deal for me. And I'm like, that's freaking easy. Like I can do that. That's easy. And we can track that. That's the easy thing to track. And so, and vice versa, there was a couple things. And I would say we're not being super like, when we do our team meetings with business stuff, it's like we want the actual like exact number of these things. We want to track them really tightly. It's more of a loose thing, but just paying attention to those things that are important to each other, and not necessarily being die hard about tracking every single time or whatever, but just, hey, do we think we hit that this week or not? If not, like maybe we need to spend a little bit more time and energy. And so again, I'm doing it a little bit in my personal life with my wife, and then with some of the fitness stuff. But I don't think it would hurt to be doing it better, because I think the more that you track that stuff, it helps. I notice it on the business side and or just in general. I think when we have those scorecard type items or the things that we're tracking, I think me and you for sure, and then probably a lot of people listening tend to be a little bit competitive, or like to win. And so like, I got to be honest, when I see those metrics and they're not, if they're not where they're supposed to be, and there's anything I can do today to push them there, like I'll catch myself doing it subconsciously. And I think that's a big part of what makes KPIs and metrics so powerful. Is it's like there's conscious, hey, we want to hit these numbers, but it's almost like there's a subconscious, like if you're somebody who wants to win, you look at that scorecard or you're entering that number and you realize you're just a little bit short, but it's like, I could do something right now to push it past there and make it in the green. It's like, I catch myself doing that on some of these. I don't know if you've experienced that at all.
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you started out with the Drucker quote, what gets measured gets managed. And I think that's right. I think of an old story, and I can't remember if it was Henry Ford or Andrew Carnegie. It was that era of guys, and they had a big factory, and it's an anecdote, and I'm sure it happened somewhat like this, but all he did is he walked in, he wrote the number of times or the number of things they'd produced in the hour or the day or that shift, and he wrote it in chalk on the floor. Mm-hmm. That's all he did, and he walked out. The next shift came in, and they were like, hey, what's that number? And somebody was like, yeah, that's how many the last guys did. And they're like, well, they did 7, we can do 8, And I mean, I think it was within a day or a week, they had increased their production by, 25 or 50% just by tracking, giving people a little competitive spirit. And so it's small things like that sometimes make the biggest difference, and then inspire people to, hey, let's compete a little bit. We can do better than those guys. And so I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind in business and in your personal life.
Yeah, that's cool. I really like that story. I've heard that before. Cool, man. I think one other thing that comes to mind is it for somebody that's out there that's listening, whether it's business, personal, or anything like that, say they're not tracking anything. This is all new to them. They never heard. They don't know what a KPI is. This is all new to them. Can you think of anything that would just be like a good place or a couple things just to get started with if you're going to do something just basic, either business or
I mean, to me, the most important thing. And it definitely gets on my wife's nerves, but the most important thing to start out my day is my morning routine. And that's something that I don't track it in like hey, I don't check a box every morning if I did X, Y, and Z. But I've got a real specific routine I do, and it sets me up for the day. And so that's something that's pretty easy that I think people can do, of just set up, hey, start something small. Hey, in the morning, instead of being on my phone, I run and read 10 pages of a book and do 10 push-ups, whatever it is. I think starting the day with something simple, something trackable, and something you're going to get in a habit of, it sets me up for the day. So, if I work out in the morning and there's donuts at work, I'm infinitely more likely to say no than if I didn't work out. And then I'm like, might as well have one. And so I think I would say start out with something super small. I like doing it in the morning because it already sets you up for success. It sets you up in that pattern of accomplishing something, and just build on it. The thing about all this stuff is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, or at least it has been for me. You start tracking one thing and you start to see that thing move, or you start to see, your run get faster, or you start to see the scale move down. You start tracking things like that and you will see progress. It's human nature. You're not going to step on the scale every single morning for a year and probably watch it go up. Either you're going to stop stepping on the scale and you're going to stop tracking it, or you're going to, make some progress. And so I think the first step is just tracking it, doing something small, and just taking a little bit of action, and it'll build upon itself pretty quickly.
Yeah, I really like that. The only thing I think I could add to that is probably, it depends on the person and what's important to you. But I would say pick something that's important to you today, and then try to figure out something you could measure that's going to move you towards that. And so again, it could be if it's fitness or if it's a business thing. Like when I think of business stuff, I think I'll give you an example where I just literally the other day, I used this is we were trying to hire somebody, and we were advertising the job, and we weren't getting the interest that's needed. And it's like the goal that I wanted was to hire a rock star project manager. And so it's kind of like, what can I do today that can move the needle forward in that? Because it's not what we're doing right now isn't working. And I was like, I'm just going to reach out to 10 people a day until I find somebody. And so literally, that's the goal. That's what I'm going to track. I'm going to send 10 messages to my contact list a day until I find this person. And the funny thing is like in that situation, I sent the first 10 text messages, and we ended up with the person that we just hired. So it didn't take that long to get the goal. But one thing I think of, a similar situation is, say somebody young in business and they're in sales, right? And their goal is to sell more stuff and make more money. What's something you can do today that you can track that can move you towards that? And I think like phone calls. Like if you're selling something, set a number of cold outreaches you want to do a day. And we've done this in the past, like whether it's 10 or 50 or 100, but this is my number. I'm going to try to hit it every single day, and then do that thing and track it. Did I hit it? Yes or no? Here's what I got. I was short. You can adjust it, but just pick something that's important to you. Same thing with the fitness stuff. Like one thing I forgot to mention is like the scale. I get on the scale every single day, and people are like, well, weight's not important, but if you're tracking it, like it's going to make a difference. So when it goes up a little bit, I catch myself being a little bit better about being stricter on tracking my diet. When it's going down a little bit, I know I'm going in the right direction. It motivates me to continue to be more disciplined about it. And so I think just picking the thing that's important to you, and then trying to come up with what do I need to do on a regular basis to move towards that direction, and then setting a goal and tracking it. And that's kind of what that leading indicator is. So.
No, 100%. I love that. Well said.
Cool. Anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, just start tracking one thing. That's it. Start with one, and then go from there.
You can always add to it, but don't get to no more than 3 to 7 or whatever. Keep it.
Yep.
Cool, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. If you like the podcast, please don't forget to like, follow, and share, and we'll see you next time.